Have you ever been underestimated, made to feel small because of who you are or where you come from? This is the story of James, a young man who endured ridicule and bullying from his classmates, only to return years later with a surprising role that left everyone speechless. Let me take you on this incredible journey of perseverance, unexpected twists, and a powerful lesson in humility. James Johnson grew up in a small town where everybody seemed to know everybody's business. From a young age, James stood out, not just because he was one of the few black kids in his predominantly white school, but because he had dreams that stretched far beyond the town limits. While most kids talked about taking over their family businesses or settling down nearby, James spoke of universities, research, and making a difference in the world. "I'm going to be a scientist one day," he'd say confidently whenever someone asked him about his future. But not everyone appreciated his ambition. In fact, for many of his classmates, James's determination became a target for their cruelty. There was a group of kids, led by a boy named Chad, who seemed to have been born with both a silver spoon and an overinflated sense of entitlement, who made it their mission to make James's life miserable. "Hey, Einstein," Chad would shout across the cafeteria, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Figured out how to invent a personality yet?" Laughter erupted, not because the joke was funny, but because no one wanted to be the next target. The cafeteria always seemed to buzz louder when Chad and his crew were around. And while James pretended their words didn't bother him, the truth was, they did. A lot. James wasn't just smart, he was determined. He spent hours in the library, poring over science textbooks that were 2 grades ahead of what he was supposed to be studying. He joined every academic competition he could, often winning, much to Chad's chagrin. But no matter how much James excelled, the bullying didn't stop. One day, during biology class, their teacher, Mrs. Carter, announced a pop quiz. Chad groaned loudly, slouching in his seat, as though the sheer injustice of having to think was too much to bear. "Relax," he whispered to James, as Mrs. Carter handed out the papers. "We all know you're gonna ace this. Too bad it won't help you make friends." The words stung, but James kept his eyes on his paper. He wasn't going to let Chad distract him from what mattered. By the end of high school, James had done what few thought possible. He graduated at the top of his class. His name was called last during the graduation ceremony, and while his parents and a few teachers cheered loudly, Chad and his friends barely clapped. They just sat there, smirking, as if to say, "Good luck out there." James left for college the following fall, earning a full scholarship to a prestigious university. For the first time in his life, he felt like he belonged. He found friends who shared his passion for science, professors who believed in his potential, and a community that celebrated his achievements instead of tearing him down. Still, the memories of high school lingered. Late at night, as he worked on his research projects, James would sometimes replay Chad's taunts in his mind. He wondered what his classmates were up to. Had they stayed in town? Were they leading the same small lives they used to laugh about him escaping? Fast forward a decade. James had not only earned his PhD, but also gained recognition in his field for groundbreaking work in environmental science. When he received an offer to teach at a respected university back in his home state, he hesitated. Why would you want to go back? His friend and fellow researcher, Lisa, asked, "You've got the world at your feet." "I don't know," James admitted. "Maybe it's time to face my past. Besides, there's something about giving back to the place you come from." On his first day as a professor, James walked into the lecture hall, feeling both nervous and excited. He had spent weeks preparing his syllabus, determined to inspire his students the way his mentors had inspired him. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. As the students filed in, laughing and chatting, James's eyes locked onto a familiar face. It was Chad. Older, a little balder, but unmistakably the same Chad who had spent years making his life a nightmare. James felt a rush of emotions: anger, disbelief, and, surprisingly, pity. Chad was just another student now, sitting in the back row, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else. Over the next few weeks, James maintained his professionalism. He treated Chad like any other student, even as memories of high school crept back. Chad, on the other hand, seemed to struggle with the realization of who James was. He rarely made eye contact, mumbled when called on, and seemed uncharacteristically quiet. One day, after class, Chad lingered behind. James was packing up his things when he heard Chad clear his throat. Dr. Johnson, he began awkwardly. James turned, keeping his expression neutral. Yes, Chad. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for, high school. James studied him for a moment, then nodded. Thank you, Chad. That means a lot. Chad's shoulders sagged with relief, and for the first time, James saw not the bully, but the insecure boy who had been hiding behind a mask of arrogance. The semester continued, and while Chad never became the star student, he worked hard and eventually passed with decent grades. On the last day of class, as the students filed out, Chad approached James one more time. Dr. Johnson, he said, his voice steady. I don't think I ever told you this, but you're an amazing teacher. I learned a lot this semester, not just about science, but about being a better person. So, thank you. James smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Thank you, Chad, and good luck out there. As Chad walked away, James felt a deep sense of closure. He had faced his past, not with anger or bitterness, but with grace. And in doing so, he had turned one of his life's greatest challenges into a story of growth, redemption, and the power of education to transform not just minds, but hearts. James's story reminds us that life has a funny way of coming full circle. The very people who doubt us can end up being the ones who learn the most from us. So what about you? Have you ever faced someone who underestimated you, or had to confront your own past mistakes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more tales of triumph and transformation.